start.
Right.
Sure.
What date?
We can move one.
Yeah, but this paper was fun. Allowed to.
Like you want to go to the other side?
Yeah, let's go. Oh, sorry. No, we're not
This is you. Okay. Thank you very much.
How do you like it with red light effect? I always like number 4 better.
56.
Yeah, I do.
How do you like to miss something?
Yeah.
No, you actually get back to Dominic's here.
What?
Go quick.
Where are you guys from?
We're
I don't know.
So she's from America.
Yeah.
Yeah, meaning why not? Do it now, not right.
Sorry?
Really short. For me, it was like 1.5 hours.
Mine was a little.
Oh, that's super rough.
Yeah, because it was a little from Chicago to Shannon. And I had to keep on like watching them around. Oh,
Congratulations. You guys. Congratulations. Good luck and good luck.
thank you.
Right. And to you folks, congratulations. Be proud of yourselves. Anyway, good luck, and good luck. Right.
No more for it.
Yeah, no more for it.
So half of our debates.
I wish I had had more debates with her.
They turned
Yeah.
really boring. Our last
Thanks. I don't know that cute is a good word, but anyway,
Let's see who led in that direction.
Well, on the first one we went.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you guys, because I was
We
a
were in a
person who
assembly and we were like, here, man, how are you
communication skills my whole life.
Basically, each thing we were talking about, like,
And so, yeah, I don't know that it's something that part of my goal was to give people the guidance to be able to
yeah, nuclear bombs.
So I don't know if it's my genes or just.
Porn is everywhere. Just like
Students, for this topic, it's going to be foreign sugar band.
It has to do with.
more porn.
Right. Are you kidding me?
So,
Have you seen my pen? I had to.
Do you need a borrow?
Oh no, I have.
Oh, I think I had.
Oh yeah, pen. Can we change?
Yes, you can have the pretty pen, multiple colors, which is yours, so you deserve it.
Which is useful.
I should get one of those. I used to have one like 8 when I was a kid.
I always lose them.
Yeah, it's
They're so cool.
Well, I bought like.
That's not a reason to
I bought it in here.
It's a reason to not lose them. Do I have any other organs?
Am I? A2? Yeah, me too.
I will try my best. I promise I will not mess it up because I want to go. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Because maybe after we go.
I do. I have an idea.
An hour still.
I have wine on.
Okay.
I even have a bottle of tea.
And she's from work.
I can use some.
No, I don't have a bottle of whiskey in my refrigerator. Those who need extra.
I think that's 3 items.
Do you think we can win the date place? No, like.
No.
I don't think we're gonna win the debate. We lost the
No, all of them.
Let's see. Team 36 was just constituted 3 days ago.
And
as affirmative?
Yeah, T36 is affirmative and AofHL B.
That's us.
Yeah, that's what you got in the negative, right? What is AofHL?
Academy of Higher
And they are affirmative.
T36 is the affirmative.
IHL, negative.
AHL is negative.
Okay.
So basically you have to.
That's what I'm asking. This was
Yeah.
maybe for the
Yeah.
flip. Thank you very much. Okay. Hate those ballots where somebody got on the wrong side of the page.
Are you guys ready?
Oh yeah, sure.
Let's start.
Do you want to know our student position?
No, I don't think there's people. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so tell me when I can start. Okay, so the internet has made the world a smaller place. Over the past 30 years, say, there has been an increased globalization, not only of people traveling to different countries, but people communicating and gaining information over the internet. We believe that actively circumventing internet censorship is a legitimate foreign policy tool. We'd first like to begin with a few definitions, and then we will go on to the reasons that we believe this. Firstly, we define circumvent as overcoming censorship using technological means. Then we define internet censorship as political or other censorship carried out over the internet through the country's ISPs. We also define legitimate as the entitlement of a government entity to do something. Finally, we define a foreign policy tool as a means of acting in accordance with the official stance of a government towards another government. So firstly, I would like to say the three arguments that we are going to have. So we have the moral, the diplomatic, and finally, a more logical. So the first is our insistence upon the rights of expression and the right to information. The second is the negative impact of internet censorship on relationships between states. And the third is the fact that peaceful and diplomatic means are far more effective than invasive methods. So to go on to our first argument, I would like to say that the right of access to information and the right of expression are essential to every human being on this planet. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself, which was peacefully proposed and signed by hundreds of countries, says that freedom of thought and freedom of opinion and expression are essential. They are human rights and everyone deserves them. Now, of course, people are able to communicate in oppressive regimes, but they need to be able to communicate in every way that they can and express themselves in every way. People have the freedom to hold opinions without interference, and what internet censorship does is it interferes with these opinions, and that is extremely negative. Now, as we can see, these rights of access to information are curtailed when certain sites are blocked on the internet. The right of access to the right of expression is curtailed when people's postings and people's own information is taken off the internet. Not only does this reduce how informed citizens of a country are, but it removes the ability of people to freely express themselves, to freely form opinions, and to freely make decisions. So secondly, we have the diplomatic reason why our motion should be supported. Firstly, we need to understand that internet censorship in a certain country can negatively affect the relationships between different countries. This is why governments are entitled to circumvent this internet censorship to better the relations between different countries. For example, many states may be propagating erroneous information or only removing true information or different opinions from the internet. This means that people who look at these documents may not get a whole picture view of the entire issue, and thus they may shape opinions which are biased one way or another, not because they reach that conclusion, but simply because that's the only information they've been presented with. Additionally, a lot of countries are designated as enemies of the internet by an organization called Reporters Without Borders, which basically works with internet censorship and reporting censorship in different countries. It labels Iran and 12 other countries as enemies of the internet because they basically do not allow information to be disseminated around in their country, and this is extremely negative. So, we can avoid conflict with these countries if we allow people to make the decisions that they can in their government. Now, in the status quo, people may be forming opinions in countries such as Iran, which have internet censorship, which aren't actually reflective of what they would think if they had the whole issue. If they know what militaries are doing, if they can get a transparent view of their government, even if their government doesn't release information, then they can make decisions. They can vote, hopefully in diplomatic elections, to decide what their country needs, and not simply what people are telling them. So finally, we have the argument that peaceful and diplomatic means are more effective than invasive methods used to implement foreign policy decisions. Now, for example, war is a foreign policy decision. If you decide to go to war with a country, that's because you have a fundamental disagreement with the way it's conducting either its own foreign policy or its domestic policy. If you allow us to circumvent all this internet censorship, that is a peaceful way of achieving the same ends that, for example, actively intervening in a country, sending troops or sending personnel into that country would have. Google executive Wael Ghonim said, "If you want to liberate a country, just give them the internet." Now, this is true because it allows them to form their own opinions, but it's also true because it allows people to make decisions for themselves. Instead of sending our own army into a country and saying, we want to make you diplomatic, or we want to make you better as opposed to different, you're giving a country a chance to make its own decision. Additionally, we see that the way to lift internet censorship, which is inevitable, by the way, is to let more experienced countries give other countries access to the internet in a way that is acceptable for them. For example, countries like the United States or Great Britain already have access to the internet and universal access to the internet at that. They know how to use it, and they've also used it very successfully to build their global economies. Now, if you allow this internet censorship to go into these economies, to go into these countries as a whole with such guidance, that is extremely beneficial. Additionally, we see that this will not disrupt any foreign policy with other countries. For example, Hillary Clinton said in an article posted in the New York Times that China is not opposed to cooperating with countries that seek to promote a more open internet. So we can see that even countries that conduct mass-scale censorship, including China, would not be opposed to this, and thus there's no reason that we have to fear. So, in conclusion, there are many reasons why actively circumventing internet censorship is a very legitimate foreign policy tool for all countries that seek to use it. Thus, I can only see an affirmative ballot. Thank you.
Can we use some pen, please?
Hey.
Everybody ready? Okay. Now, first off, I'd like to question, how do you believe that China, a censorship pro, oppressive nation, how do you believe that they're going to be in support of the internet circumvention?
So they're not supporting this internet circumvention. They simply acknowledge that it exists, and they won't take any action against it.
So they're only going to acknowledge that it exists and not take any action against it? How can we guarantee that they're not going to take any kind of action against it?
Because foreign ministers have gone on the record saying that they will cooperate with these countries even if they are undertaking the circumvention.
Okay, now this is the case of China. What about in other oppressive nations? How can we guarantee that they'll have the same response in terms of to internet circumvention?
So the reason China is in this example is because both it has wide-scale censorship and it's a very powerful nation. For example, South Sudan, even though it may have problems with this, is not going to have a large army which could attack, for example, the US.
Okay, thank you. Now moving on to let's clarify your contentions. Your third contention, you stated that peaceful and diplomatic means are the best way out for relations, correct?
Yes, I stated they are more effective.
Now, can you prove exactly how internet circumvention is a diplomatic kind of relation?
So basically, in foreign policy, what many states seek to do is to make sure that other states have governments that suit them well. And this could be achieved in diplomatic talks,
Okay.
for example, talking with ministers, but it also could be achieved by allowing people access to information, which allows them, for example, to vote in elections in a way that seems to be more
Okay,
informed.
thank you. So do you believe that these diplomatic kinds of intervention will actually be successful?
Yes, or what, it depends on what you define as success, but they do seem to imply that they would make the country more attuned to its own citizens' needs.
So you're saying that diplomatic relations practically have a guarantee to have internet circumvention go around the censorship in that country?
So yes, we do believe that this circumvention is going to work. It's going to be implemented.
Okay. Now, moving on to your first contention, you stated that right to information and the right of expression are essential and are protected by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes,
Okay.
that is what it says.
Now, can you prove exactly how the right to information and the right of expression are upheld through internet circumvention of censorship?
So, for example, the freedom to access information is not guaranteed when you have censorship because there are certain websites, for example, which people can't access which contain information.
Okay.
If you give them a VPN through which they can access those websites, they now have access to that information.
Do you agree that the right to life is the most paramount human right?
Sometimes rights come in conflict, and it is important to uphold our morals and values while
So-
looking pragmatic as well.
So you don't believe that the right to life is the most important right?
No. If you live without having any ability to express yourself, that is not always best.
Okay, thank you.
Review some background, please. Stop background, please.
Judge ready? Opponents ready? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, a clear observation must be brought up and taken into account. It's the resolution's lack of an actor. Who is going to circumvent internet censorship? When is it right to violate the sovereignty of another state? Without these two key questions answered, it is impossible to start even deeming internet circumvention as legitimate. The affirmative claim that this tool will be used by a legitimate nation is one that endangers the entire world. Who and what determines what government is legitimate or not? If everyone is given the power to violate another's sovereignty, then it is risking full-scale war. In other words, who watches the watchman? First, I'd like to go over my own points and then refute our opponents. Contention 1. Technology is an enabler of a right, not a right itself. The opponents are saying that freedom of expression, freedom of speech, those are included in the internet. But the fact is that a human right is among the things we need in order to live healthy, meaningful lives, like freedom from torture. It is a mistake to place any technology in this exalted category, because over time we will end up valuing the wrong things. For example, a horse was once needed to make a living, but the right is to make a living, not the right to own a horse. In today's debate, we are arguing about critical freedoms, such as freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Those are not bound to any technology at any time. In fact, if anything, it's sometimes the restrictions on the internet that can lead individuals to know what their rights really are. According to foreign correspondent Veronica Greenwood from CBS News, when information is freely available, individuals can be passive while remaining informed. But when people are suddenly plunged into radio silence, they almost by default have to take to the streets. They have to check on family members. They have to see what is going on. And the government loses its ability to spin the situation through internet channels and to threaten that any revolutions will be put down. Also, according to CBS News, today many governments have been thinking twice about universally restricting all cell phones and internet technology in recent protests, because many argue that shutting information sources down is equivalent to signing their own death warrant. Thus, internet circumvention is not a legitimate policy tool because internet access, much the same as any technology, is not a human right, but is only one of the many channels in realizing human rights, one that can be counterproductive in its goal. Contention 2. Internet circumvention is actually counterproductive to the goals it is set out to achieve. Internet circumvention is counterproductive for these three main reasons I will briefly go over. First, it leads to more censorship. Second, it puts people that are circumventing in danger. And third, countries use circumvention to benefit their own national interests at the expense of human rights. First, internet circumvention often leads to more censorship. Blatantly going against the laws of another nation causes the circumvented nation to see other countries as a threat to their policies and thus outright ban or even chase out companies that allow internet freedoms. An example of this can be seen with China's new domestic version of Google called Baidu, that is not only replacing Google, but is being sold to other oppressive regimes to maintain control on censorship. Secondly, whereas internet circumvention makes it possible for citizens to go online when otherwise banned, organizations that facilitate circumvention can unwittingly cause dissidents to be jailed or even killed by the oppressive governments. For example, in the Iranian elections of 2009, when Project Haystack, which promised to allow dissidents to circumvent censorship, was abruptly withdrawn, when poor design exposed activists to fatal harm, revealing information about them to Iran's state monitors. Thirdly, internet circumvention is a tool used without any checks, thus making it open to be used for national interest at the expense of human rights. The United States, Britain, France, and many other European countries, for example, contribute millions of dollars to internet circumvention. Yet simultaneously, they are the very same countries who financially benefit from the selling and exporting of censorship software to those very same countries in order to help oppressive regimes monitor and spy on their own citizens. Now I'd like to go over our opponents' points. They say that it ruins relationships, that censorship itself ruins relationships. But the thing is, as I stated in my point, by circumventing the internet, we are using an aggressive policy. This hurts the relationship so much more as the other countries see us as a threat. We are undermining their laws and attempting to break them. They also said that we should communicate in any way, but as I stated, it is counterproductive, as when we try to circumvent the internet, it does not work. It is chased out and in fact puts those people in harm. If they want for communication to be free, then they do not advocate internet circumvention. They also say that you can make decisions from internet circumvention from the internet itself, but while this may be true, the internet isn't even free because it gets either pushed out, more restrictive, or the people that are circumventing get killed. So you can see that this point does not hold anything. They also said that it uses the internet to build economy, but oppressive governments usually don't have that much internet access. For example, North Korea, they don't even have internet. They can't afford laptops. By circumventing the internet and saying we are promoting the economy, nothing is going to happen if there's no internet in the first place. They also said that China is not opposed to circumvention. I find this blatantly not true, as China is pushing us out. China is even arming up to try to fight our internet advances. Furthermore, the United States has been circumventing China, a censorship-heavy country, and China has used information warfare techniques, hacking into websites and spreading viruses to disable and discredit organizations in response by dissident hacker groups. They are attacking America directly through internet attacks. They do not want us there. They do not appreciate that we are there. We are not making any positive change through internet circumvention. Furthermore, as we have stated, it only leads to more oppression. It leads to more people getting killed, and it does not do what everyone wants to do, which is promote freedom of speech and promote human rights. For these reasons, we strongly negate. Thank you.
Just a minute, please. Yeah, I just asked one of the questions. How do you phrase it? Thank you. Yeah. I'm gonna take the watch. Hello.
Oh, is
Well-
this yours?
Oh no, this is not mine. Well, first of all, do you think that people have the right to express freely what they think?
Yes.
And do they have the right to express freely what they say?
Yes.
So, isn't censorship attempting to this right?
We don't agree with censorship, But the fact is that internet circumvention actually leads to more censorship, as I proved in my speech. If you are against censorship, you're against internet circumvention, as it leads to harsher restrictions and people getting killed.
So these softwares that you mentioned from censoring, are they the people, the government who sells them, or are they private entities?
Could you please?
Yeah, the government, is it the government or private entities who sell these censorship
It is the
softwares?
NGOs, but the thing is the government does not restrict them. The government can restrict them. They can say you don't sell censorship technology to oppressive regimes,
So
but
if
the fact
the
is
country
they
is
don't.
a capitalist where you can, when the government really can get into private stuff, so if the private sector is the one who sells them, why the government should enforce that?
It's the same fact as how we don't allow people to sell drugs. It's just something that's not good for people. It's true that there's capitalism. We allow different markets to be used. But things that exploit the human rights, that don't promote anything in the world, should not be allowed to be sold. So capitalism.
Thank you. So okay, if you do agree with us that censorship is bad, then why? Can you explain to us then why are you against the circumventing of the internet censorship?
As I stated in my second point, how it's counterproductive. We see internet circumvention as a tool that does not, it's not even a tool because it's not working in it the way it wants to. It's actually making censorship worse. So if you're promoting internet circumvention, you want situations to be worse from the backlash of what happens.
Can you quote a situation when circumventing censorship doesn't work?
Well, I stated many examples of how China is actually pushing us out. They push Google out and they're using Baidu so they can censor more. You can't even search.
Yeah, they're censoring more, and we already say that both teams that this is bad. So thank you.
Thank you.
How much time do you want?
Could we have another minute?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks. Do you want the clock?
Ladies and gentlemen, in my speech, I'm going to be addressing 4 main points in this debate. First of all, I'm going to talk about diplomacy and its importance in international relationships and address the core of the debate we're having today, which is foreign policy tools and not actually whether internet should be censored or not. Second, I'm going to address the inconsistency of the negative team's case, which I'm going to expand on further. Then I'm going to address the misunderstandings about that they have encountered in our case about aggressiveness and diplomatic means. And as a fourth point, I'm going to reinforce our arguments, which have been neglected completely by the negative team, which refused to accept our stance, which we have expressed clearly in the first, along with the first speaker. So, first of all, about the diplomatic means and the tools we are going to use to enforce internet censorship. We believe that internet censorship is not something legitimate, and governments have absolutely no right, in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that most of them have signed and ratified, to infringe the right to freedom to access to information and to freedom of expression, which is actually what is happening. Team Negative comes here and states that these rights aren't infringed, and want to demonstrate the fact that actually life is a more important right. I don't think it's our duty to weight the rights, it's the duty of each human being. But here I would also like to point out the fact that people get killed for expressing their opinion in countries where internet censorship still is enforced. So basically, if we lift the censorship on internet in these countries, we are excluding the possibility of them being killed for expressing their opinion, which is actually what is happening right now. That is why this point already falls to our side. Furthermore, I'm going to rebut the 3 points they made. First of all, is sovereignty absolute? Is a country actually entitled to interfere with the internal policy of another state when this policy concerns foreign affairs and at the same time might be detrimental or dangerous for its own citizens? Negative one himself stated that China right now is actually gathering its army and it might be directing it towards the United States. But why is this happening, ladies and gentlemen? Maybe because the Chinese population is misinformed about the role of the United States on the foreign arena, because its access to internet and information and news and real-time news is being censored by the Chinese government. So therefore, sovereignty isn't an absolute right and should not be taken as it. Then I would also like to address something that the first negative said, admitted to in the cross-X, about the private and the government sector profiting from censorship utilities. He admitted that it was NGOs who were selling the censorship software. So therefore, the government isn't the one interested in profiting from censorship. The government is the one interested in enforcing human rights, the respect for human rights into these countries, and to make sure it is being respected. Now I would also like to pass on to the reinforcing our case and to establish one of the main values and tools that we are going to use and prove it to you that it is actually completely enforceable. We have clearly stated in our definitions that foreign policy is the official stance of a state, and we are going to use solely diplomatic means. The first negative took, I don't know for what reason, decided that we would use warfare, or we would target these states in an aggressive way, and we would like to lift internet censorship without the will and the consent of these states. But the first speaker from the Affirmative team has clearly provided you examples where of diplomatic relations between the United States and China, where, for instance, Hillary Clinton stated that the Chinese government didn't actually have anything against diplomatically negotiating and talking about lifting internet censorship. Furthermore, states like Iran or let's say states from Northern Africa shouldn't necessarily be handled aggressively, and I think it is reasonable for the Affirmative side to take that into account when it comes to diplomatic policies, which is exactly what we want to implement. We don't want to be telling Libya or Tunisia to to lift internet censorship overnight and to force them to do that simply because we want human rights to be exactly because we want human rights to be enforced. But we must carefully handle the way we talk with these governments and make sure that it would not be detrimental to the foreign relations between these states. So for the reasons exposed and relying on on reason, we beg you to propose.
Affirmative pass.
Thank you.
Alright, second.
Thank you for your speech. I'd first like to ask some questions. How is internet circumvention diplomatic? How is it passive? How is it not an aggressive tactic?
How is it aggressive?
I'm asking you, how is it not aggressive?
I don't see any aggression in it.
So by undermining a country's laws, it's not aggressive?
Who said anything about undermining a country's laws?
Don't oppressive governments have censorship laws?
Yes.
So wouldn't we be undermining that law?
No, we wouldn't, because we would be diplomatically discussing it, and we wouldn't be forcing it to cancel that law.
So your main reasoning on how it's diplomatic is because Hillary Clinton said China's okay with it. Is Hillary Clinton Chinese?
No, Hillary Clinton is the representative of the United States of America.
So there's no Chinese representatives that have said they're okay with it?
Yes, there are. I don't remember their name right now.
Okay. You stated that because of circumvention that everyone will be happy that there's going to be freedom of speech. Will oppressive governments just roll over once we start circumventing?
No, of course. You need time for things to work out.
So eventually, somehow in the future, it might work.
Yes, it is. It's definitely not going to work if we let the status quo as it is, because people are getting the right people's right to life is being infringed by them wanting to express their opinions by these oppressive governments. I can actually give you an example on that.
So oppressive governments will let go of their oppressiveness just because we start circumventing?
No, and that is exactly the point I made in my speech. We're not going to uplift the censorship on internet overnight. It is something that it's going to be done systematically and at a pace adapted to a country's internal policy.
All right, thank you. You said, what's your definition of legitimate in today's topic?
Can I have that? Legitimate is something that entitles a country to interfere into the internal policy of another country.
So when you say breaking a country's laws is okay,
I
that
said
means you're
nothing
entitled.
about breaking a country's laws.
This is just a scenario. Is it? Do you have entitlement if you're breaking another country's laws?
No, you don't have.
So how is circumventing the internet and breaking that country's laws legitimate?
How is circumventing the internet breaking a country's laws?
Did you agree that China has censorship laws?
I said nothing about interfering with the laws of a country. I said about negotiating it so that ultimately the country has the right to decide whether it cancels that law or not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
I'd like to thank my opponents for their speech, but first we'd like to address what they said about our case and then move on to theirs. They said that censorship is illegitimate and that the government has no right, and we agree that censorship is illegitimate, and that, yes, that there is no right for them to have censorship. But the AF does not have a plan that says that censorship will leave. As we stated before, the censorship gets even harder, as we can see in the case of China and when they kicked out Google and put in Baidu, which was a more strict and more censored form of the internet that the Chinese people had to deal with. Therefore, as we can see, if we follow the AF's plan, there is even more censorship, as we noted before. So they're increasing censorship, which, as they stated, is illegitimate. They also said that sovereignty can be broken when it hurts the citizens. And they said that the Chinese, maybe because the Chinese are misinformed because of censorship, they are creating this army. But as we can see, they are contradicting themselves because their definition of legitimate is going into another country with the right reasons, and with the consent of others. And even though they say Hillary Clinton and Chinese diplomats have agreed that internet censorship, or that circumventing this internet censorship is acknowledged and that they will not retaliate, as we can see with them kicking out Google, they are retaliating. And although their words might say that they're not going to care and they're just going to acknowledge this, we can see from their actions that they do care and they do not want this censorship occurring. And they also said that the negation side said that we will use warfare, and that the first AF showed that diplomatic actions say that the Chinese are okay. But as we stated before, they're showing their discontent with their actions, even though they might be saying that they're okay with all of this circumventing their censorship. Also, they said that we are not counterproductive, and that we are counterproductive, and they concede with the fact that we are counterproductive, which is exactly why this tool is illegitimate. It is not getting things done diplomatically. It is going against these other countries' laws, which, as they conceded, are put in place by governments like the Chinese. These laws are there to censor the internet, and when we go in there circumventing the internet, we are breaking their laws. And even though the diplomats are saying that it's okay, we can see by their actions that they're clearly not okay with this. So this tool is illegitimate. Not only that, but the tool is not benefiting its people. As we said, it is counterproductive. And these people face the repercussions of the governments that decide to circumvent. For example, China has attacked the For example, as we can see again in the case of Baidu, the Chinese people now have to deal with a more strict sense of the government. And this tool, as we can see, not only brings harm to its people, but it also brings harm to the countries that are circumventing. China has attacked the US by using cyber attacks against data networks on the US weapon laboratories in retaliations for circumvention, which is once again showing that the Chinese are not okay with the circumvention. And they say that internet is a diplomatic tool because there's no warfare that comes from it, but we can look to the case of the Arab Springs. Those revolutions are definitely not diplomatic, they are warfare. And although they say that internet circumvention is diplomatic, they lead to war, which is making this tool illegitimate. They also said that they're not forcing human rights overnight, and that they are talking about these foreign relations. But circumventing is not talking, especially when it goes against their laws. And no matter how much these government officials say that they are okay with it, we can see that they are not okay with it. So we are, in a way, forcing these human rights onto them and keeping them and forcing and in turn harming foreign relations. And as we've shown, internet is not a human right, and it is counterproductive because it hurts the people and the foreign relations, which is part of what the AF is saying, which will not happen. So as we can see, their tool is illegitimate, and for these reasons, we negate. Thank you.
Okay. A minute of prep time. Okay, so if you agree that censorship is happening in the status quo and you agree that it's bad, how do you propose to solve censorship on a mid-frame timescale?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
How do you
mid-frame timescale
propose
part?
to solve censorship if you agree that it is negative and bad?
Well, we're not here to say that we're solving it, but we're saying that you're making it even worse.
Okay, so to simply remain in the status quo with censorship imposed upon people with no means of escaping it is better?
Well, no, but the way you're doing it is making it even worse, and there are other ways that we can circumvent this censorship.
Okay, thank you. So would you agree that if a law is unjust, it is suitable in some cases to disagree with the government on an issue, even if there may be some disapproval from that government?
Yes, but because of your definition of legitimate, we are going with it, and because of this, your tool is illegitimate because you're going against their laws.
Okay. You said that the words said by the diplomat, who was actually a worker for the, or a minister in the Department of Foreign Affairs, if we can't trust a diplomat's words, who can we trust?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying you can't trust their words, but if you look to their actions, you can see that their words aren't true, so...
So would you agree that we can misinterpret both words and actions, and that one isn't inherently more reliable than the other?
I don't understand how you can misinterpret, yes, we're not going to do anything when you're circumventing, and then see all of the restrictions that they put on their people when they throw them in jail.
So do you think that some of these actions could actually not be caused by censorship, but by other issues they have with the United States?
Well, that depends on the issues, and I'm not aware of what issues you want to talk about.
So do you think it is perhaps a bit odd to assume that something is a direct result of something when you don't actually have any evidence for the causation?
Well, we do have the evidence. Would you like it?
Sure, but this isn't CX. Okay, or like policy debate. So would you agree, so you said that this could ask us to, or have citizens initiate a revolution, which would be war, but would you agree that citizens could initiate a revolution at any time, really, and that it's really only a matter of probability and citizens' motivation?
Well, with this internet circumvention, you're increasing the probability, so it's leading to these revolutions.
So wouldn't you agree that the initiative itself is still coming from the citizens?
Well, you're giving those citizens the initiative to form their groups and to spread the word that they want to rebel.
So would you agree that sometimes people are killed and for voicing their, or trying to use their freedom of speech, as you said?
Yes, in certain situations.
So if these killings cannot get out to the public in other countries, how do you expect our governments to condemn those governments that do these killings?
Well, I'm not sure if you're talking about where you're bringing that up from.
Okay, so you said it's fine.
Time.
Yeah, we're allowed to talk for time. How much time do we have?
You have 4 minutes.
Okay, we have anything that I want to say.
Minute past.
Gracias. I mean, thank you. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, I know what I want to say. Yep.
2 minutes past.
Thank you.
Minutes past.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to point out the inconsistency of their case. First, they said that they are against censorship at first, but he still doesn't know that. No, I'm sorry. In the first speech, they said that they were against censorship, but then on the second speech and cross-examination, they admitted that censorship was bad and that they agreed with us. Of course, because censorship is bad. Then why shouldn't we stop it if it's gonna be against our human rights? Then the internet, as they say, is not a right. Of course, it's not a right, but it's the way to access to the right that we set from expression to opinion and from not interfering with their opinion. So as they say, not only at the first, as we said, not only in our first speech, but also in our second speech, people get killed for expressing their opinion in oppressive countries. So the internet is one of the only ways that they have, even anonymously, to express their feelings, to express what they think. So as the second speaker admitted in the cross-examination, circumventing is the tool in which they will have more access to it. But it is not necessarily a bad tool, as we addressed on our second speech, because the only point that they have addressed from our speech is the diplomacy. That's actually, because they agree with us that censorship is bad. So the fact that they don't understand a plan of diplomacy means instead of wars that we are against completely, tell us that not only they only address that single argument, but also that they don't understand what diplomatic means, which means exactly talking, discussing, having countries on communicating. And that's what we want, because we, like our first speaker said, are not gonna propose to the countries, are not going to impose, to change their laws. Because, well, as we also said, sovereignty is not absolute. For example, if we were on the times from the Second World War, and we were United States, for example, and we were seeing that in Germany people were getting killed and their rights were being violated, didn't the states have completely right to be able to enter the country and to look for pacific means and to help the people from the country which rights are being violated? It's the same thing as censorship, which is doing, because it is violating their rights. Not only the right for expression, as the 18 and 19 article from the Human Rights Card, but also the right to live. Because we're seeing that people are getting killed for saying these things at the street. They are being killed for having an expression. So if we want to protect the people, we should do this. Also, the negative thing ignores the importance of internet as the only way for citizens to express themselves, as we already said. So having their inconsistency on their case, and especially agreeing on the same points that we are agreeing, in which we both want to protect people in the same place.
Yeah, that's what we all want. And this is a debate by values, by the value of people and the value of expression. So if we're looking for, and even like the inconsistency that they were saying that we had an inconsistency on our case because we didn't have a good plan. But we're having a good plan. We're going to have diplomatic means, which was our second argument, and it's the only one that they have been addressing too. So we do want to explore, we do want to express the rights of people, both their lives and their expression. So we've seen how sovereignty isn't absolute, and we're not counterproductive because we're actually having the same reasons, saving lives and freedom of expression. So for all these reasons exposed, we will only see a ballot for the affirmative team. Thank you.
The rest.
I don't like this topic.
I know.
That's what we were.
One minute past.
Thank you.
Two minutes past.
Thank you. Okay.
1 minute left.
Stop it. Everybody ready? Okay. Ma Zhaozhu, Foreign Ministry spokesman of China, once said, quote, "We urge the United States to respect the facts and cease using so-called internet freedom to make groundless accusations against China. Therefore, we can clearly see China and other oppressive regimes are clearly against the fact that internet circumvention should be a foreign policy tool, and they will not ever agree to such so-called peaceful and diplomatic relations." Now, first, I would like to address that the affirmation has several contradictions in their case. First off, they stated that the United States and China are on good relations. However, they never addressed the fact how when we rebutted their this claim, they never addressed this fact. On top of that, they also never stated the fact how China does not. They never proved the burden that. They never proved that China is actually on good relations back with the United States after they claim that China is actually, there are actually oppressive people in China, and how the government oppresses their own people, and that they won't actually concede to the United States' plan. Secondly, they stated that people get killed from expressing freedom of speech. However, the affirmation is ultimately going for freedom of speech. That's what they aim to promote. However, this is inherently contradictory, as we can see that this, by their claim, this will lead in more death, as we have proven earlier. Thirdly, they stated that it's okay to sometimes go against certain laws. However, this goes against their definition of legitimate. As they stated, their definition of legitimate is practically to not go against these laws, to take legitimate action. Therefore, we can't go with that definition. And next, in their last speech, they brought up the example of Hitler in Germany. However, we can't go with this as it was brought up in the last speech, but if you don't buy that, they stated that Hitler was invading and attacking other countries and that we use military intervention. However, we can see that that internet censorship is not causing us to go to war. It's not a reason for war. It's completely different. And now I'll move on to the contentions level. They stated that we never addressed their first and second contention. However, as our second speakers stated, these contentions only help the negative side. As we can see, we are going for human rights. We never said human rights are wrong. We agree that human rights are the ultimate goal that every society must achieve. However, as we proved earlier, and as the affirmative did not disprove and address, the affirmative plan is inherently contradictory. It's counterproductive, and it will lead to more oppression. Therefore, we can see that those two contentions were successfully rebutted and don't support the affirmation case. They only undermine it. Now, their third contention, they stated that it was peaceful and diplomatic means are the best way. However, as we proved earlier, internet circumvention is not peaceful. It does not lead to peace. It is not, and it is not the best way out either. It leads to more death. It leads to more oppression. It leads to the government using and abusing their own citizens. Now, onto the negative case. Our first contention stated that technology is an enabler of rights and not a right itself. Our second contention stated that internet circumvention is counterproductive. Now, we can see that those two contentions were not addressed. Those impacts were never touched, and therefore the negation remains untouched. As we can see, they never provided any example to disprove how there has been a case where internet circumvention is not counterproductive. Therefore, those impacts still stand. Now, we can move on to two main issues in today's round. First, what is the best way out? And second, how are human rights best upheld? We can see through the affirmation their plan of circumvention is counterproductive and contradictory. It harms society. It leads to more oppression, and the government puts national interests above human rights. Now we can see that the negation, we do see that censorship is bad, but we can see that the affirmative only hurts society more. It leads to worse impacts. Now, the affirmation case and their plan is based on an ideal but impossible society. We can see that in today's society, people fight. China is oppressive. They don't allow for such internet circumvention to happen. They don't allow for censorship to be removed. And therefore, we can see that the affirmation plan is not only counterproductive, it is impossible. Now, moving on to the second, how are human rights best upheld? The affirmation, they haven't rebutted our impacts, and we can see that the negation has successfully proved how the affirmation plan is counterproductive and ultimately leads to more human rights abuses. Now we'll move on to the reasons why the negation won this round. First off, in the burdens debate, we can see that the affirmative has not reached their burden of showing why internet circumvention is positive. Therefore, that inherently makes their case fall, and the negation, our burden was just to prove that internet circumvention is not successful, and we have done so successfully. The AF plan is contradictory but also counterproductive, as we have stated earlier, and our case remained untouched. Therefore, we can ultimately see that the negation is the only way to go, as the affirmative is counterproductive and counterintuitive. Therefore, we strongly urge a negative ballot. Thank you.